Hi everyone, thanks so much for coming on such a miserable day today. It's good to see so many people. My name's Katie O'Donovan. I work at Google in the UK Public Policy team. Before we start properly, I'd just like to ask you all to put your phones on silent. You don't have to turn them off anymore, and indeed, if you would like to tweet, the hashtag is RSA PTC. The first half in caps, the second half in lowercase, although I don't think that matters. We're also filming and live streaming today, so hello to everybody who is tuned in from home. We'll be joined later today by Anthony Painter and Stella Creasy, both of whom need very little introduction, but Anthony is the Director of Policy and Strategy here at the RSA, amongst other things worked on the hugely influential review of the Police Federation. Stella Creasy is MP for Walthamstow, has made a career of really harnessing the power of community and often the power of tech to bring community change, and most recently as a tentative candidate for Labour's deputy leadership. In terms of the format, Anthony is going to give an initial presentation on the findings of the research that we were delighted to sponsor, and Stella will then follow up with her responses. I just wanted to say a couple of minutes because some of you might be wondering what Google is doing here today and why we're so keen to be part of a discussion on social mobility. It probably goes without saying that we actually think the internet is one of the most extraordinary transformational things of the last of recent history. It gives the same opportunity for a bedroom pop star or a YouTube teacher or an app developer as was previously restricted to those that were lucky enough to be seen by a boozy A&R man or study at the best universities. We know that there are those who think the internet is just great for watching cats fall off trees, and that too is true, and we think actually the internet can be both, and it is for Google much more than just a search engine, but really a growth engine for people and their ambitions. There's a wealth of opportunity that does show exactly how people are realising their potential for the internet, but there's also that nagging doubt. Are some groups missing out? Is it only open to a few? Who is being held back? And so really we, as part of government and business and charities, want to ensure that we're doing all we can to help people access opportunity online. We have a programme in London, Google Campus, and we've been working with small businesses for years to get them online and grow. And we've reached over 250,000. But we wanted to know actually what would happen if we went out of London, if we moved away from the tech sector and the startups, and if we talked to all of the businesses today. So to look really, to check that we are working with those who want to turn their ideas into reality and don't feel they're being held back. So this year, starting in Leeds, we're visiting 5 UK cities. We're there from between 3 and 6 months, working with all small businesses, from cafe owners to coffee shops, to hairdressers, to plumbers, to really see if we give them deep and long-term support, we can help them bring their businesses online, because we know when they do, they're twice as likely to grow as those who aren't, which is good for everybody. Already in Leeds, where we've only been open for a month, we've seen about 1,000 small businesses. One particularly stuck in the mind of the people who are running the programme. A guy called Andy attended at the first session. He came back again and again for one-to-one mentoring. He made some small changes to his website. He redesigned the site, he updated his social media presence, and in the last 2 weeks has made over £3,000 that he said was right down to the advice and support he got at the Digital Garage. We also are working hard to improve the talent of the next generation. Getting computing on the national curriculum was a big win for many of us interested in ensuring the benefits of digital are shared. And we are now working with computing at schools and Code Club to bring more skills and talent to teachers and to young people. So Anthony is now going to talk about how we can coordinate our efforts. We know it can't be down to one section of society, to one business. We know that actually many people in this room today have been instrumental in bringing the opportunity of digital to many. What we want to do now is see that if policymakers can harness that change and bring it together, can we really give the power to create to all communities? So with that, I'll introduce Anthony.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you very much to Google, and thank you so much, Stella, for devoting some time to us this afternoon. Really very grateful in your busy schedule. Okay, let's start off with a bold statement. Economic and technological change is fast, public policy and institutional reform is slow. who gets to share in technology's benefits are grounded in the decisions that we make as a society. And if you like, this is the overall theme of the new digital learning age. When undertaking this research, I was very taken by the thinking of an economist called Carlota Perez, who looks at technological bubbles across time. And they have very similar characteristics. They're very unpredictable. It's not linear. Technological surges of innovation happen almost seemingly suddenly. When they do happen, wealth, ownership, opportunity become very concentrated. And it takes a while for society, for politics, for public policy to respond. And I think we're in one such period of time currently now where we're seeing a huge sort of swell of innovation connected with the internet, opportunity potentially, but it's still concentrated. So what we do now is critical for ensuring that the benefits are properly spread to as many people as possible. And hopefully today we can present some ideas as to how. Digital technology is having an enormous impact for some. The confident creators, as we'll come to know them during the course of this afternoon, a new vista of creative opportunity has opened. For others, they see possibilities, but have yet to fully realize the full potential that digital and other technologies might offer. We know there's a skills gap that has to be filled. It's estimated about 750,000 people are needed to enhance their digital skills. And that's been a much discussed debate. What has been less discussed is how the digital environment can spread the acquisition and development of all skills. And this is absolutely critical. Digital offers some potential opportunities, but only if we have the right responses. We know that those who are engaged in non-routine tasks in the sort of vernacular of economists are those who stand to benefit the most. Those who are engaged in routine tasks that could be replaced by robots, by computers, by algorithms, whatever it may be, are most at risk. And these are the risks that are present within society and the economy currently. So how can we ensure that as we are seeing this enormous change, that those who are most at risk are protected and as many can benefit as possible? We took a survey with the help of Populous. We spoke to 2,000 UK residents, and we asked them what their attitudes were to technology, power, and opportunity. Overall, it has to be said that the attitude towards technology, and this underpins the social legitimacy of technology, is very positive. In general, people believe that technology can help solve societal problems. They agree the benefits of the internet outweigh its risks. However, and this, if you like, is a canary in the coal mine, respondents are concerned that society is increasingly divided between those who can and cannot use technology. So some of those social divides that Carlota Perez identified, and has been much talked about in the literature, is already being identified by people when they look at the role of technology in society and economy, so on and so forth. So there's something here, and people are picking up on something. We then undertook a segmentation of the audience, and we came up with 5 groups. I'm only going to talk about 3 of those 5 groups today, and they add up to about 60% of the population. So if it doesn't quite add up to 100, that's why. First of all, there is the confident creators. You all know who they are. If you go down to Tech City, or you go down to any sort of urban tech area in any urban area in the country, you come across them. Very adept at technology. They're using it to expand their opportunities, setting up businesses, getting on in life, learning, developing, progressing, building networks, very powerful networks, very deep reservoirs of social capital. That's about 11% of the population, confident creators. Then comes the held back. Now, held back, actually, it turns out, and we'll come on to this, are very adept at using technology too. Very interested. They're acquiring knowledge and learning through technology. They want to get on in life. They're ambitious. They've got ideas. They see themselves as creative, but they feel they need more support. And they need a greater level of confidence, and they need a greater level of engagement in order to turn those creative dreams into some form of reality. And that's about a fifth of the population. This is a very significant segment. And finally, there's the safety firsters. They're least engaged with new technology. They do use it. They use it mainly for entertainment and information purposes. They don't see technology as fundamentally important in their lives. They are not overly concerned about it. It's just part of what they do. However, the big concern about this group is that they may not have spotted the risks that might be approaching them. Because if you look at the literature, those, again, who have jobs, often routine jobs that require routine skills, sometimes low skills, sometimes high-skilled routine skills, are at risk. And this is 30% of the population. And so the worry is, unless there is some sort of attention to this, they may be facing risks in life later on. So, focusing on the held back, they're far more likely to be looking for support. Everyone wants more access to finance, of course. But interestingly, the held back, which is the sort of sign column in the middle, they're looking for greater support from government to turn their ideas into reality. More time, of course, but look at that bar in the middle. Almost half of the held back think they need more educational training to help them turn their ideas into reality. Remember, they have ideas. They think those ideas are worthwhile. They are creative ideas, but they need more support through the education and training system. And they need more self-confidence that might come from the education and training and support from others. Very interesting group, the held back, because they're looking for something. They're striving for something. They're not quite getting what it is they're looking for. We mapped out the three different groups on this sort of spider web. And what you discover, actually, is the held back and the confident creators are using the internet in almost exactly the same ways. They're using them using the technology very frequently. They're using it for the same purposes, accessing knowledge or expertise, information, educating themselves, staying in touch with friends and family. There's one big difference. The held back don't use it for developing professional contacts on a regular basis. So it says something about their social capital, I think, which is really interesting. The safety firsters are, as I say, less engaged with the internet for work and training and education purposes. But that's a really interesting division. They're very similar to the confident creators. It's just they don't have access or engage actively so much in building the social capital that will enable them to get on. So, we then had a look, having identified this group, the overall attitudes towards technology and society. We then asked a question about what would social mobility look like? What would an inclusive form of social mobility look like? And there's four aspects to mobility. And there's so much academic debate about social mobility, whether it's going forwards, whether it's going backwards, and it's quite a ferocious debate. I think for us, the conclusion we came to is that mobility is not enough. You could have more mobility, but still you wouldn't necessarily have a successful and thriving society. There has to be a level of inclusion as well. People have to be progressing, getting on up, progressing in their careers, rather than just overall levels of societal mobility being improved, although they could improve, and the UK is not strong when put alongside the international comparisons. So we look for a greater level of upward intergenerational mobility, but also needs to be progress within classes and within income intervals, so people getting on up and progressing within their lives as well. You wouldn't look for a society that had wide status and class distinctions. The wider the gaps are, the more difficult they are to leap over. And so some sort of equality measure is necessary alongside mobility. So we care about inclusion and social mobility together. And you'd expect people to have greater access to networks, institutions, and opportunities. And this is essential to the power to create. And some of the policy ideas in the report are kind of designed to respond to those challenges. The obvious place to start when you're talking about social mobility, of course, is school. there's a lot of skepticism about the role of education in social mobility, and part of this is that it looks as if social mobility is largely frozen over the last few decades. I think that's too despairing. I think if you were to speak to my parents' generation and talk about the role of education in social mobility, they'd be exceedingly positive about it, because they were the first generation, some of whom had the opportunity to go to university and complete an education up to the age of 18 and beyond. So I don't think we should despair about education. And we looked at the role actually of technology in education and what contribution that might make. And the answer is not necessarily spectacular, but significant. The Sutton Trust shows that good use of technology can advance learning by 4 months over the course of a school life. So if we can ensure that the best is replicated everywhere on the basis of evidence, of impact, on the basis of teachers learning from one another, and collaboratively building ways of working that can ensure that every child has an opportunity to learn from technology in an effective way, then that would be a beneficial system to establish. And we're all very much about creating the right systems here. The second thing, and I'll just put this bluntly, that the level of careers advice in our school system is a national scandal. And it is something that needs to be urgently addressed. And one of the key recommendations of the new digital learning age is that the frequency and type and range of employer contact has to be rapidly expanded, certainly from secondary education onward. The academic evidence is very clear that those students who have a variety of employer experiences, not just 1 week work experience once, but mentorship, masterclasses in school, project learning established by employers, see a wage uplift later on in life. And for us to have allowed this system to develop where there isn't these strong relationships universally, I think is a national scandal, and we've got some very strong recommendations on that front. But then there's something else. When we looked at the way that people learn later on in life, we spotted something which is happening spontaneously. Now, you all heard of the sharing economy and Airbnb and Uber and the like, and however it's defined and so on and so forth. But there's something that I think is quite effervescent happening in the learning space. Our survey picked up on this because it showed a lot of people engage in online learning in order to develop skills that can give us some advantage in the workplace. There is a whole series of networks of different types that constitute a spontaneous shared learning economy. And this hasn't happened because of government or anything like that. It's happened almost spontaneously. And just a few up here. Put up Sheffield Forum. It's a local forum. There are many local forums, but people are learning how to set up a business, identifying the right contacts they need, identifying the right people to help them with the skills through local forums. There are a series of specialist sites, such as GitHub, and if you're a coder, you'll know what that is. It's where there is collaborative learning between coders. Udacity is where tech industry help people who want to develop their coding set up in Silicon Valley, but accessible beyond. But then there's interesting more broader sites, such as Italki and Udemy. Italki is a language learning site where language tutors exchange their time with those who want to learn a language. Udemy is far wider. And this is very peer-to-peer. People who have skills put on courses on Udemy, people download them for a relatively low amount of money and gain skills as a result. YouTube has become one of the primary learning channels. And if you're learning any skill at all, you'll be on YouTube at some point learning from a 5-minute video of someone who's expert in that arena. Digital Business Academy in Tech City, similar, offering links between professionals and those who want to learn and establish a tech business. Khan Academy, a lot of you will know about. And then this one is interesting as well. And the reason I put it in is CMEX Shift, again, which a lot of you have talked about, which is a internal network within the concrete company CMEX. But what is happening on there is people are learning energetically from each other within company networks as well. So the spontaneous learning economy happens within companies, happens openly on the internet, within specialist fields, so on and so forth. And it's incredibly vibrant. Udemy, for example, boasts about 6 million students so far. There are 14,000 tutors on there. This is not small fry. So that got us thinking. What can we do not to replace or take over or replicate the spontaneous learning economy? What can we do to give it greater legs? And we discovered this initiative. We didn't discover it, it was there. We identified it as relevant to our findings. Cities of Learning in the US was set up in Chicago in 2013 by the mayor of Chicago, and that's really important. The mayor set it up because he was worried about school kids, in the main, not having something to do during the summer vacation. So he set up a huge city initiative, which is about mobilizing people, employers, education institutions, individuals, learners, to come together to develop skills during the summer months. 100,000 kids engaged with Cities of Learning, with the Chicago City of Learning in the first year. It's now been replicated in Pittsburgh, DC, Dallas, Los Angeles. It's a movement that's growing, and the point about this is it's bottom up, and the public policy intervention was about leadership, it was about mobilization. It's very devolved, it goes with the grain of what's there. It doesn't try to replace the learning system, it tries to give it extra energy, to draw more people into the possibilities. It's built around these things called open badges, which essentially are digital currencies, where people with skills grant a digital badge to someone who has demonstrated they have the capability, and that individual can then take that badge to an employer or an educator, whoever it may be, and say, I can do this. So it's very open, flexible. It brings together a fragmented system without trying to replace it. And that's one of the centerpiece recommendations of the report, that we need to identify cities in the UK that can take forward a similar initiative, not just for young kids, young people, but for everyone as well. And this is the way to plug people in to the real possibilities of learning. The Hellback can be reached out with initiatives such as this. I'll leave you with this final thought. Technology is not a magical force, it is a human endeavor. We can steer and influence its impacts as we have done since the dawn of civilization. The responses that we have to new technology are our choice. It's up to us. Thank you very much.
Settle myself down.
I'm going to chair and respond at the same time, but I'm going to pass over to Stella to begin with.
Thank you, Anthony. I think that is really fascinating as an example of what, for me, is the central question of our generation and our time, which is the scale of change that happens. Let me start by giving you my best example and my best point of thinking about all of this, which isn't, there's lots and lots of discussion about the internet and how it might have changed things. The thing that I find fascinating is that there are now lots of studies positively correlating the existence of Facebook with divorce. So that most central and most human of emotion, love, has so fundamentally changed as a result of technology. 32% of people who regularly use social media have thought seriously about leaving their partner. So when you go home tonight and you see your partner with their phone, you might want to talk to them. A third of all divorce filings in the UK involve the word Facebook. That was in 2011. Now, to give some context to that, Facebook only became a public network for us to be able to use in that way in 2007. So within less than 6 years, essentially, the nature of that very most human emotion and connection has been fundamentally changed by the existence of this technology. Now, the other side of that, of course, is that many people now meet their partners online as well, and they're not in current relationships at the same time, I should hasten to add. Anthony is absolutely right when he talks about the possibilities that are there. I fixed my boiler via YouTube. It's still working, so,
Me too.
But it also means that it's not a given, the direction and the nature of the changes that we will see, and the nature of the challenge that we face. It also means for us, in terms of our traditional public policy landscape, which has always been rooted in institutions and the role that institutions play in our lives, it's now to be found struggling. And I think that's the case whether it's political parties, whether it is indeed international institutions such as the United Nations, or even our healthcare system. We have to fundamentally rethink not just how we do things, but why we do things, if we want to tap into that possibility. And I think what's very interesting about your report and the things that you're starting to talk about are how we might be able to do that. Because for me as a progressive, this is a fundamentally ideological question. It is not a given that these relationships, it's not a given that these forms of change are going to be progressive, that they're going to be inclusive, that indeed they're going to unlock the potential of our society. So the challenge for all of us who care is to think about those new models of how we might work together to unlock that creativity rather than just to manage it. Frankly, to provoke change as the best way we have to becoming a more open, more inclusive society, rather than simply trying to work out how we deal with it after the fact. Let me give you some examples then of what I think that means in practice, because it can seem like a fairly dystopian vision. When we see taxi drivers complaining about Uber and you think about the robot cars that are on their way along, the nature of this changes so quickly, we simply cannot respond in our traditional format. I'm always very struck that Nigel Farage is desperately concerned about the Romanians, but he doesn't seem to have thought about the robots. And yet we're talking about 30% of jobs being automated within the next few years. That can either be extremely scary or it can be empowering, but it can only be empowering if we do it together. And I think for me that's a central political choice we face in the next generation, which is whether we rebuild together and we unlock that power together because we all benefit from working together in that way, or we accept that the risks and the changes are so overwhelming so quickly it's everyone for themselves. Now, I'm firmly in that former category. I firmly believe that if we recreate our way of thinking around networks, around individuals and how we can collaborate together, we can not only do the things that they've been doing in Chicago, we can unlock new possibilities that we haven't yet thought about. For every disruptive technology, there are some hugely empowering technologies, whether it's the fact that you can now get solar-powered house paint, so you can paint your house and power it at the same time, or we can collaborate in terms of our healthcare, that we can bring together people, for example, with long-term health conditions to help each other to manage their conditions so that they stay well, not simply go in to hospital. So there are huge different choices to be made in this agenda, but it means that we need an understanding of why it matters that everybody is part of it. And for me, if you start looking at the world in terms of networks, you recognise you're only as strong as the people within your network. And for me, that's a real challenge about how do we then unlock more people being part of a network. And what I think this kind of way of thinking does is it challenges those on the left to say it's not simply enough to think that people should be part of it. You've got to understand what the tools are, what the resources are that people need. Let me give you 4 ideas of the sorts of things that I think that involves, and then I think, Anthony, it'd be great to get your feedback on whether you think this is true. First and foremost, it absolutely is about assets. And look, I see it in my local community all the time in Walthamstow, that it is a very different question asking people to take risks, to be part of creativity when they don't have finance behind them, when they live in poverty, when they don't have access to the kind of relationships that people think of as a given for some other parts of our society. And one of the things that really challenges me when we talk about the social mobility debate is our understanding of just what assets people need, I think, has been too narrow. It's been very much focused on financial assets, because the second asset I think people need is very much about those networks and what comes through those networks, and it's both hard and soft networks. Why was I very involved in the campaign to end unpaid internships? Because you could see for lots and lots of young people, getting a foot in the door was about not just being able to work for free, and so being from an environment where they could take on a job for free, but also about the person to ask to get that opportunity in the first place. So in the new network society, we have to understand the range of assets people need to be able to move around and be part of a network. But it also means it's not just about getting into the network, it's about how you operate and how you grow that network within it. And for me, that's very much about skills, so absolutely education, but also confidence and resilience. You know, I go into schools in Walthamstow and I have to say to the young people there, your lives aren't going to be the same as your mum and dad. You're not going to have one single job. And I'm with you on the careers advice. My careers advisor told me to be a dentist, and I don't even like teeth. But actually, if you think about the jobs, the employment opportunities, the potential for the future, you know, there's some studies suggesting 7 jobs that people will have in their lives, 2 have yet to be invented. That requires not just the hard skills about being able to take different roles. So yes, learning how to code, yes, learning to speak different languages, yes, being literate and numerate. It also resolves the resilience to think about moving into those different fields, those soft skills that people need to be able to be adaptable. So we have to think about our networks and how we not just build up the assets, but also the resources you need to be able to move between assets and between networks. That is a fundamentally different policy agenda for all of us in political parties than the one that perhaps has defined the last century. Now, for me, it's a hugely exciting one, because the strength that comes from people being able to collaborate together, from finding new ways, whether it's on or offline, to be able to inspire each other, to build those networks, to build those assets, is the strength of progressive politics. It's about when we work together to get the talent in each of us out for the benefit of all of us. I do this job because I think somewhere in Walthamstow there's a young person who could cure cancer if they had the right education, the right opportunities, and somebody believing in them and pushing them to do it. And then think what kind of world we'd all live in as a result of it. I don't do this job because I think you should all be on Facebook looking at your partners and worrying about who they're talking to. But I do think there is a question for all of us that these changes and the direction that they take is not a given. It's nothing to do with the technology, it's everything to do with the ethos. And we have to build a new ethos within Britain about the kind of networks and the kind of creativity we want to see and how it's got to be for everyone. And that takes us back to the very start of the internet, doesn't it? When Tim Berners-Lee said this is for everyone, we have to make that a reality. Thank you.
I think that's spot on. And to take the sort of relationship and family metaphor further, I think actually what you've described is a very healthy family environment. In a healthy family environment, there is a degree of security, what you refer to as assets. So people can, or kids can try, and if they fail, they're not sort of castigated. They have the opportunity to fail, but they've got the security that they'll still have the love and support if they do. They have that social support built around them through their siblings, their parents, and wider family networks. And they learn those soft skills and resilience. And it's sort of concentric rings of human engagement and relationship that we're looking at. And the beauty of the internet at its best, it is that sort of social environment rather than just the hardwires of technology and engineering. So I think when we're looking at a different model of progressive politics, if you like, those notions of the types of relationships you have and the resilience that are built within those relationships is absolutely essential. I just wanted to sort of think about your point about institutions and change and progressive politics, because this is a really challenging point, actually. It sounds obvious, actually, when you look at it. You look at the changes we're seeing, that, of course, old-style institutions with their hierarchies, their exclusive cultures, their barriers, have to be broken down if people are to enjoy a properly open set of opportunities. The problem is, though, a lot of the people who are insiders in those old institutions are the forces of progressive politics. And I just wonder, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this, whether the centre-left can challenge itself to challenge its own assumptions about the way that the world should be, whether that's a state, whether that's a market, whether it's politics, in fact.
Sure.
And politics is a prime example in this regard.
But look, I mean, I come from the cooperative tradition within the Labour movement. We've always had an understanding about the power of the network, the power of mutual engagement, the power of working, social connectivity. This is not new in a sense, but perhaps what we need to do is rediscover it and renew it for the modern world. I mean, actually, what's fantastic about doing progressive politics in the 21st century is your opportunities to connect with people, your opportunities to share that network, to build that network, are stronger than ever before. I couldn't do what I do in Walthamstow without that network of people. They give me ideas, they give me inspiration, they also give us resource about how we can tackle some of the challenges in our local community, and I think you can scale that up to a national level too. We didn't win the argument about payday lending in this country individually, we won it collectively, and we won it by pointing to what was happening in our local communities and what the alternative could be. So that way of collaborating, that way of mutual engagement has always been there within progressive politics. I think what we have got to do now is recognise that the people are paramount. People are what make institutions work. What we need to do is take away the old ways of working that are stopping people being as creative as they want to be. You know, some of the best people I know about the future of public services are those at the front line, because they see the challenges. They see how they want to work with the people that they're working with. We've got to give them much more power to be able to do that in partnership with the people that they're working with. I'll give you a great example of this. I'm a fan of personal care payments, but because I think it helps people who have long-term conditions, manage their own lives, and wouldn't all of us want that? But I had a young mum in Walthamstow who had twin daughters, and she wanted to use her personal care payments to pay for childcare on a Thursday morning, because for her, for 18-month-old twins to not be there on a Thursday morning was a blessed relief, and that was what was going to make her life better. The local authority was very clear that she couldn't do that because the money was to be spent on her, not her children. Actually, what she really wanted to do was she had a friend in the children's centre who also had personal care payments, and they wanted a whole day of childcare, which if they collaborated, they could do. That we didn't have ways of working that could make that happen wasn't just frustrating for them, it was also frustrating for the people working with them, because they could see the difference it would make. Unlocking that is about that network that says, actually, we have confidence in the choices that you're making, and also you have ideas to bring to the table that we hadn't even thought about how to make this work. Yeah. Now, institutionally, the personal care payment process has only just begun to understand what truly empowering people, truly engaging people can mean. But at a local level, we see all the time the ways in which it could work better. How do you tap into that is the question for all of us. How do you make that network work for everyone? Yeah,
indeed. And it's sort of two models of social change, really. The old style, do you sink your identity into a sort of solid phalanx of people and use that to march forward, which is one model? Or do you look to distribute power and say and the ability to control what's in your lives and trust people to make mistakes and try to advise and guide them rather than try to direct them?
I actually think it goes further. I'm very concerned that this country is at a crossroads where we see our politics about picking a side, and we don't recognise that actually we are at best as a country when we collaborate together, that I have an interest in people in other parts of the country doing well, because when they do well, I benefit from the impact that they have. Yeah. And I think there's a real challenge for us in progressive politics to reject that very divisive, very negative form of idea that there are winners and losers in society, and what we've got to be is a society full of more winners, and actually say we win when we win together. We win because we make sure that every kid, whether they're born in Glasgow, whether they're born in the East End of London, whether they're born in rural southwest England, has something to give, and if they don't give it, that's wasted potential that we all miss out on.
Yeah, I mean, something you've got a reputation for is this very sort of civically engaged style of politics. I'm just wondering whether
I am your worst nightmare as your local MP.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I am going to get you in. And look, you'll hear a lot of people talking about the importance of listening to people. I'd say I hate consultations. I want to get people involved, because the idea that 650 people in Westminster, or even in Town Hall, and I speak as a former local councillor, I've been, poacher, turn gamekeeper, now maybe I'm the pheasant in all of this. But the idea that 650 people have all the answers and the ability to make it happen doesn't make any sense to me. Whenever I've been elected to any position, nobody's given me a magic wand. But actually, if you get people involved, you get things to happen that you never even thought were possible. That's the spirit of creativity, and that's really exciting. Yeah. That's why I say it can't be about trading people off. It's got to be bringing people together.
And that's exactly what Rahm Emanuel did in Chicago, going back to this. He basically built the platform for people to come together. He didn't say, right, this is the program, we're going to deliver it, and here's what you can come and knock on this public institution at 9 a.m. on this Monday morning, and you can come to a class. He basically said, this is the whole network and system we're going to create, but it's up to you how you use that. And we want employers, education institutions, individuals, community groups to really go for it. And let's do this as a city. Let's make this about Chicago and what Chicago is, and about Chicago's future, rather than just what can your local city authority offer to you, which I think is a very intriguingly different way of doing things.
Yeah, I think people don't want a broadcast version of public policy anymore. They want to interact with it because it is their local community, it is their country, they want to be part of it. So we have to find ways of working that enable them to do that, but also enable us to be able to share that load. Yeah. That you can get more done when people are part of it. And actually that's happening all across the country. It's happening, Gisela Stewart is doing some amazing work, for example, in Birmingham, because it also has to reflect where people are at the time. Yes. Look, what works in Walthamstow will not work in Copeland in North East England, but there are other things that will. What we have to do is build a shared sense that it matters that it does. It matters to me that those young people do well. It matters to me that we don't leave people behind. When I talk to people who are interested in things like UKIP or even the Greens or even the SNP, what I get from them is a sense of concern and a sense of fear. And I think what we have to do is be clear with people. This is difficult. It is change. It is about working in a different way, but it's a fundamentally hopeful and exciting way to work because it's about being part of a team. It's about being part of that network. You are only as strong as the other people in your network. But if we build other people up, we get amazing things done.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, right. Let's bring the audience in at this point. I'm going to sort of co-chair respond, so just bear with me. Has anyone got any burning questions? We'll start here.
Yes, I'm a councillor.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry.
I'm Councillor Caroline Needham in Hammersmith and Fulham. And one of the things I'm passionate about is that we need to engage in the way that people are living their lives. If you take, for example, internet safety, the debate around police is about bobbies on the beat. Our young people are at risk in their bedrooms, probably more than walking to the local tube station. Yes. But I think we need to be looking at how we can engage with people where they are. Doctors' surgeries are full of worried well people who are often very articulate, very well read, and actually, you know, there is misinformation out there which gets people very worried. We need to be taking what we do to where people are, and some of where people are is online, and some of that is very healthy, very educational and wonderful, and some of it is worrying people, is putting people at risk. And in my view, we as people in public life are perhaps not sufficiently looking at how we can be inclusive. More people I know are not online because of poverty reasons than skill reasons. Yes. And yes, a lot of the debate is about what skill level you're at. The problem about not being online for poverty reasons is that your skills begin to diminish. You've been really competent when you've been in work, you become unemployed. And again, we are very narrow about the way we let people access library. I'm not going to talk anymore, but the gist is there.
No, indeed. Thank you very much. Let's take another couple of points while we're... Let's take this gentleman down here.
Where do you see the future of the traditional university? Yeah. Will that shrivel as everything goes online? And what then happens to physical interaction, real people talking to other real people in the real world?
Yeah, great. Thank you. And we'll take this gentleman right at the back. Sorry, I've...
Thanks. It's good to see you being so jolly about the direction things could go in. But supposing one of the problems is that a lot of people aren't jolly, and that's an actual condition of being creative.
Okay, good.
So you call it the Van Gogh phenomenon?
Pardon?
The Van Gogh phenomenon?
No, I'm talking about the fact that we've got consciousness, and that when people use it to extend our sense of self, then they bump into other people extending their sense of selves. And if a bunch network on the basis that their selves are quite happy, thank you very much, and if everybody did what they did, then everybody would be fine, then all the other selves tend to bump into that quite a lot. You'll find that there's a reason why we're spending £105 billion a year on mental health in this country.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I actually think there's a common thread in all of these, which, and it's a slight issue for me, because I think if we look at the technology, we miss a trick. For me, this is about an ethos, first and foremost, and it's a very generational ethos. I look at my 4-year-old niece, and she looks at everything, and she does this. Just because of the technology, that she's supremely comfortable with modern technology, but because she has an expectation that the world around her will shape to the things that she's doing. I think that's amazing and brilliant, but as this gentleman would say, it's not a given which direction it will go in or the impact that it will have. That's the challenge for us. So it's not necessarily the technology per se, it's not so much about, look, modern technology allows us to do things, but fundamentally if we don't get the ethos right, if we don't understand why, the purpose of engagement, the purpose of participation, the purpose of old and new institutions in that network, we will miss a trick. And I think sometimes where this has gone wrong is people looking for a silver bullet. Well, we'll put everything online so you can fill in your tax return without understanding what that does. For me, this isn't about consultation. This is about how you engage people. And that has to be an ethos both off and online. and it also has a fundamentally ideological and driven process about it, which is where it comes to your point, sir, about that it's not a given which way it will go. Networks can be closed. Networks can be disempowering for people. I am extremely concerned. I see it a lot in my local community about some of the issues and things are being shared online, that when I talk to traditional institutions, especially when it comes to views about religion, and it's a big issue in my local community, and I think it's the same thing in Hammersmith and Fulham, and our traditional institutions and our traditional forms of community engagement are struggling with it because they don't see that world to come. So how you engage with all of that is quite a powerful thing. I mean, I had a great example of it this weekend. We had, unfortunately, the English Defence League come to Walthamstow this weekend, and I took to Periscope to show people actually what the police were doing and to show them what it was like on the ground in Walthamstow, because nobody would believe what was happening when you saw the online discussion about it. And when I tried to say to the police, look, this is what the EDL are saying about the area where they're coming, they didn't have an understanding and engagement about what was happening and why that mattered to engage with it. You'll have also seen we had the hipster cop. I don't know if anybody saw.
Yes.
Like, it wasn't until people were actually able to visualise it and connect with it and see other people in their networks talking about it, they were able to identify what that meant for their local community. We have to be able to engage where people are in those networks, but we also have to come to it with an ethos first of why engagement matters, rather than just saying, well, it's great that we've got police tweeting, or it's great that we've got online learning resources, because otherwise we don't connect them up into what we're trying to achieve.
I'm going to just make a couple of points. The internet safety point's a really interesting one, and the engagement of public sector. We do a lot of work with the police, and what is becoming clear is actually the sense of threat and danger, as you say, is in different spaces in different ways. And so what that actually does is change the nature of the relationship between citizen and public services. So that's a very convoluted way of putting it, but nonetheless, it means that the role of the police often becomes more about engaging, informing, advising, warning, giving people access to others, speaking with parents so they can spot the danger signals if someone's being radicalised or facing threats of all sorts of things online. So it's actually about trusting people again. It comes back to it, and it's how the police can trust people, how they can share information in different ways. And we're going to renegotiate the whole gamut of ways in which we engage with services over the next few years, and that's just one example. On the university question, I think this is in a similar sort of domain. I think that the point about what we presented here today, it doesn't replace anything. It changes access to it. I think that what will ultimately happen, there weren't any MOOCs on there. You know, a lot of people talk about mass online open courses. That wasn't what I was talking about, because in a sense, that's universities taking what they've got, packaging it up and putting it out there. Whereas actually what they should be thinking about is how they can break down what they've got, make it more consumable, maybe think about models that aren't the 3-year degree course that require £27,000 tuition fees, but might be sort of components of it, far more hybrid in the way they operate, maybe mixing bits of work and work-based learning with a university setting. So it won't replace the traditional university. I don't think any sensible university should feel threatened by any of this, because they're meant to be innovators, after all. And if they're innovators, they'll work this out. But there will be a whole sort of renegotiation that goes on there as well, between what people expect and what universities are able to offer. And I think it's quite an exciting opportunity for them. They're just not quite there yet, because they're in a very safe, secure position. I think a lot of this, the old institutions are in a safe, secure position. But what they don't realise is that the ground is slowly being undercut, and they need to be very, very aware of that. Now, just on this point about isolation and creativity, I do take that point. The internet is a social technology. Social isolation is a problem on and offline. I don't think it's unique to a technological space. Hopefully it alerts us to the importance of the social supports that you may need. If you want to be a lowly creative, no one's going to tell you that you should operate or behave in any different way. But if you have a need, that's a different matter as well. And I think that the changing nature of what's needed in society and our understanding about the resilience and support that's necessary should actually alert and highlight us to the risks that some individuals face in their lives writ large. And hopefully this is just a reminder.
Yeah. I think I would hate for you to think that I'm jolly about all of this, because I think it could go anyway, and I think we have to be very alive to the fact, especially in your research shows, that there are lots of people for whom this does feel a very dangerous, very uncertain time. what I'm concerned about is there's a risk for us that somehow we then think because it feels risky, because it feels dangerous, because it feels uncertain, somehow we've got to try and stop it. We've got to try and hold back from it. And actually the key for me in terms of progressive politics and tackling inequality in society is tackling that sense of risk and tackling people's barriers as well, and actually recognising we have a duty to do that, not just because it then means that maybe more people can be online, but it then means that more people can contribute. And that's fundamentally a redistributive process. So actually for me, it's not about being sanguine about, well, there is risk involved. It's about recognising that the risk is something we've all got to address collectively as well, because we miss out on people if they're left behind on this process as a result.
Okay, great. Let's take another bank of 3. I'm going to go for this gentleman here. It would be good to get some gender balance in the questions. And this lady here, and then I'm going to go for that gentleman there.
Hello. Nick Corsten from a charity called STEAMco, which is backed by or supported by the RSA, a community-based charity that powers communities to inspire kids with creativity, inspired by Ken Robinson. I'm sure most people are familiar with his work, TED Talks. He did a talk for us in Liverpool the other week at our launch. Just wondering what chance have we got with what we're talking about here when we have an education system focused on rote learning, global league tables, and teaching creativity out of children?
Okay, thank you.
We've heard a really good range of what the barriers might be for engagement in both the technology and the people networks that you've talked about, but not really anything about disability, maybe learning difficulties, maybe there's a need for people to understand that not everybody thinks the same and that one model doesn't necessarily fit all. And I'm wondering how you think that could be addressed.
Great, thank you.
That need for communication.
Great. And is this...
Hi. Yeah, I was just wondering, Stella, if you've got any examples of kind of digital initiatives and tech initiatives in the Stowe which kind of express the kind of change you're talking about, the kind of education you're talking about.
The Stowe being Walthamstow, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome Stowe.
God's own country, we prefer to call it, to be fair.
So let's take the Ken Robinson point very quickly. I think what the report shows is that there is an advantage to have a variety of ways of learning, and there are some students that respond to collaborative project-based learning, for example, and there's quite a strong evidence base on that. I think the important point as a counterweight is the educational value has to be secure in anything that we try, and so the knowledge base of teachers that's deployed within schools has to be absolutely there. So yes, there should be innovation, there should be a variety of different ways of learning, but it has to be based on that sound research base applied by teachers, ultimately.
Yeah, I'm going to collaborate all the questions together, because I think you're right, creativity has to be seen as a resource for people, and in of itself something that we have to teach. And one of the things I'm still in a period of mourning that we didn't win the election, but one of the things I was very proud of was that Labour was saying actually we would make creativity part of the national curriculum, and actually say, this in itself is a skill that we've got to develop precisely for some of these reasons. You actually hit the nail on the head. I'm sorry you didn't say your name when you said not everybody thinks the same, and that's kind of the point. Actually, isn't it brilliant when you have different ideas, different creativities? So we have to have a way of thinking about the world that means that we see what we're missing out on. I spend a lot of my time talking about equality, and people think when you talk about equality, you're talking about the people who are being missed out on. So you talk about women's equality, and people say, oh yes, it's about, you want special treatment. It's like, no, we're doing you a favour when we have a more diverse, more inclusive society, because we're tapping into all the resource and potential that everybody offers. What does that mean in practice? I'll give you an example of something we did in Walthamstow. So 2.5 years ago, I looked at my casework, I looked at the changes that the government was going to bring in, and I was really scared, because I thought, this is where I agree with Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson says people go to their MPs when they've run out of better ideas of things to do. And when you are a community under pressure, and legal aid has been cut, CABs are closing, all sorts of resources are not there, then the MP by default becomes the person that people kind of go to. And often what I would hear is, yeah, the housing officer said I should go and see the MP about that. And you knew that people were being told to come to me as a way of getting out of it. So we built a thing called 7 Days for Stowe. And what I said to people was, give me 7 days of your time and we will tackle the impact of austerity on our local community. How we do that is going to be up to you. I can't force you to do anything, but I will bring you together in a process of deciding what are the things that we could do as a community to tackle the impact of these changes on our local area and support our community. By the end of the year, about 350 people were involved in different projects that they had come up with. Now, whether that was the food bank supporting the local night shelter, but it was also a befriending project, it was teaching people on low incomes how to cook healthy food, and it was collaborating together to say, what are the things that are missing in our local area? I would have struggled to run any one of those projects or to come up with the thinking behind any one of them myself. But by building that network, we were able to do things that are still going in Walthamstow, that are still having an impact in our local community and are spiralling off doing all sorts of other things as well. That, for me, when you get it right, is where you tap into the potential, because not everybody thinks the same, because there are different ideas about what needs to happen, but you can't do that on your own. And you have a responsibility as a community to work out what you can do. And I think that's the thing for me about network thinking, is actually it stops people being bystanders, because everybody has to take part for it to work. So everybody has to find a way of working together. When you get it right, it's transformative. When you get it wrong, it's actually very exclusive. And I think that's the challenge for us as a society. We can either be a society where you have networks at the top that hold on to power, that hold on to resources, and therefore constrict the ability of other people to come forward, or you can build a society where everybody has a part to play and everybody's expecting everyone to have a part to play. It is more diverse, it is more diffuse. For me, it's fundamentally more empowering.
Okay. Let's just take a very, very quick fire round.
Sorry.
And more than a sentence, and I'll cut you off, just because I know there are a lot of hands up. So if this gentleman here, then this gentleman here. I'm going to have to go to a third gentleman unless there's a...
No, there was a woman there.
Oh, sorry, I apologise, sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We are in the room, you know.
One sentence. Normally you get people to do something when they can see the benefit. Power to create, a lot of people say they don't define themselves as creative, but maybe power to enable. People seeing that they're being enabled to do something and see a benefit in doing so might help bring it aboard.
Okay, thank you.
As briefly as I can, what is the relationship? I'm questioning the relationship between politics and social media as you're presenting it here, and worry about the idea that politics has to take the lead on all of this, because I'm always reading, and I read 3 stories today about how, in fact, the social media creates the context within which changes that politics can make happen, rather than the other way around.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Joe Kilroy from the RTPI. You talked really interestingly about the spillover benefits of technology for the wider community, but I'm just wondering about cities like San Francisco, London and Dublin, where the presence of the technology sector has actually had a negative effect on existing residents in terms of increasing rents and putting pressure on transport. I suppose the question is, whose responsibility is it to address that, and do you think it can be addressed?
Okay, fine. Right, so we're going to have 1 or 2 sentences each just to summarise.
Yeah.
I'm actually going to take the point that was made about power, because I think that's the fundamental one. And I do take the point about inequality, but that's probably a bigger discussion for another day. But this one is critical, because I think this comes across a lot in what Stella is talking about, a lot in this research that we've done, this new form of power that isn't led by the traditional leaders, by the traditional institutions, that people get up and go and make a difference themselves. And it all sounds very radical in the 1960s, but I think it's very real all of a sudden. And I think if we want to have a different way of doing things like cities of learning, these can be grassroots movements, and there's absolutely potential there with the help of enlightened political leaders. But there is an opportunity to challenge existing institutions and demand far more from them, and it's a challenge, an opportunity that I hope we take.
I think it's a question about what you think politics is about. With the greatest will in the world, it's not about Twitter. It's not even about Instagram. For me, politics has always been about not just being angry about inequality, but finding answers to how to address it. New technologies make it easier for us to collaborate, but in themselves, if you don't have that ethos about why you collaborate, that inclusivity, that sense of the changes that you can make, it doesn't make a difference. People haven't trusted politicians for generations, right? 50, 60 years ago, the trust models have gone. What they now think is that politics isn't effective. What the opportunities that networks do is they provide an opportunity to show you that actually you can change things. If you'd have told me in 2010 that Wonga would have been going out of business by 2015, I wouldn't necessarily have believed you. But actually, if you build a network, you can change things. I am much more hopeful now about the power of progressive politics to change the world than I was when I first got elected. But I also know that it has to be about everybody who's part of it, because that power doesn't come from one individual. It comes from being part of a network. That's what we've got to create.
Stella, thank you very much, and thank you very much. I've enjoyed today. Brilliant. Well done.